Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I thought I would make a video speaking to my spiritual path and points and times in which I felt lost. I guess spirituality and spiritual paths in general, and the prevailing theme of feeling lost, which I think is something that many of us can relate to, something that affects all of us at various points, but that goes a little bit less spoken of or unspoken much of the time. This is primarily inspired by my wonderful friend Hanni's video over on Fierce and Pretty, her recent video where she shared a card spread she did and then spoke to some general themes and ideas about society and spirituality and things that I think were really thought-provoking and important. So I will have that video linked down below. I highly recommend checking both that video and her channel out. She creates amazing content. In fact, most of my friends in the community have been creating amazing content that's been inspiring me, which is wonderful, and it just makes me feel very excited to be a part of this community and have such wonderful friends. But I am filming outside, so apologies for any noise, ambient sort of environmental things that I can't control, such as lighting and various distracting factors. It's also a bit warm out, so I've got a nice iced water here. It's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that translates to in Celsius, but without further ado, I guess I'll dive right into the topic and idea of my spiritual path and feelings of being lost. First of all, let's get it out of the way. I think this is something that affects everybody, regardless of how far we are into our spiritual path, how far we've come, how much we've learned, how stable or steady or entrenched in spirituality we may be, whether it is a very significant part of our life or something that we see as more ancillary or secondary role to other things that we maybe primarily identify with. I think when we start to take our spiritual path and view ourselves and our lives as a primarily spiritual experience, that's when feelings of being lost in our spiritual path, I think, affect us more, when they start to pervade our everyday lives and space in a way that can be detrimental. I personally, and I guess I will reference a conversation I had with Hanni and a few of my friends on I believe it was either like a Zoom or something to that effect, sort of a conversation we were having. Hanni was actually asking us about times and if and how often we feel lost. And I won't speak, of course, to anybody else's experience. It's not my place or what they had to say. But I remember saying that I feel lost pretty much every day. There are days when I wake up and I'm not sure if I believe in anything, if I just really think that my five senses are all there is to this world and that there's nothing higher, above, beyond, outside of myself. There are definitely days I wake up feeling that way. There are other days when I question if that may be the case. So there is a bit of a spectrum that I find myself on, in which I am lost at least once a day, even if it's only for a few minutes. I think that this affects everybody differently. I think it can become harder to feel okay with being lost when we are surrounded by social media figures and representations of others that aren't necessarily true to who they are in their entirety. We come on YouTube and are part of these communities on various social media platforms where we are getting the highlight reel of most people's lives. Of course, this has been spoken about in many regards, in many ways, when we start to romanticize and glorify others' lives and think less of ourselves. But this also applies, sorry, the light's a bit strong from that side. This also applies to feeling like we may be alone in some feelings that we're having, especially when we are sharing our spiritual experience online, but less is being shared about those darker aspects or those less desirable aspects. We like to share the things that we think may help others when we have highlights and things that we think are exciting and fun, and we clip them together and try to make them packaged into this nice little format. And so when we're feeling lost, me as a viewer or you as a viewer is lost and then sees all of these videos with people who seem to have it all figured out most of the time. It can be a bit discouraging and isolating, and it can make us feel like we're alone in those feelings when I don't think any of us are. There's also, of course, books and various materials where we see people that we may respect, that we see as authority figures, people who are quite knowledgeable or I would say, advanced or proficient in certain spiritual spheres that seem to have it all figured out, that publish works on things that tell you that this is the way it is, but yet another work contradicts or says that that's the way it is. We pick up books and they speak as if they are fact and not opinion, as if they are true entirely and in their own right. And of course, this is going to be true for most books. It would be a hell of a book to read, I would say, if we were to pick it up and there was this very self-deprecating preface speaking to the author's opinion, saying that this is how they feel, or that there of course are other options. We're not going to want to read all of that fluff. It would create quite the page count, and I don't think a publisher would want to pick it up, especially given the fact that it would have come off kind of wishy-washy. We want to come across pure and strong in our convictions. I think that's true in most areas of life, but I think we have to take all of that with a grain of salt and understand that nothing is entirely true, I would say, or true in that there's always something else. I don't think that there's any one spiritual path that's right or wrong that is going to solve and remedy all the answers. No spiritual path or belief system is going to answer all of the questions or make us feel completely secure. While there may be the rare few out there that have complete and total and utter blind faith and never feel lost and always feel on track, I think that that is exceedingly rare, and even those who claim to be in that position may not actually be and want to more so just portray themselves to be. Although I'm not saying that doesn't exist, I think most of us are lost a lot of the time. And now, I guess I'll speak a bit to my personal experience with those feelings, as opposed to generalities and more societal level ideas. But I guess as a bit of a preface, if you don't know me that well, I am a professional tarot reader, which is still something I feel I have trouble saying, or, we have a train coming through. But I guess there's that. But that's still something that I have trouble saying, especially in my real life, to others. Sometimes I get questions that make me feel train choo-choo-choo. But that's still something that I grapple with feeling confident in and valid in my own life, both on an inner level and feeling just valid in and of myself, but also in just the way that it is perceived, generally speaking, and then also the way I project onto others. There's a whole thing, I guess, the gambit of feelings and emotions concerning that, but it's something that I grapple feeling like I am valid in. I guess there's the idea of imposter syndrome that comes in, which I know we all have feelings of in whatever profession or hobby or pursuit we may find ourselves in. Of course, that's going to affect us. I think that that's something that affects us even more in the society we live in now, given the access we have to others and the amount of socialization and the amount of people we have to socialize with, which would in previous times not be as great in number as it is today. So there's that. Sometimes I feel like I am a fraud. I wake up feeling like this is not something I should be doing. Am I valid to even offer this guidance or insight through the cards? Is what I'm saying of any merit to anybody out there? There are feelings like that, and this is my profession, and you might think that somebody who feels qualified enough to embark on this and receive money and resources from others in turn for their services would not be in the position to ever feel unsure of themselves and their work and their skills. I don't think that that's the case. I think, and in my spiritual path as well, I recently made a video actually with a similar background, so I was in the same place filming, speaking to my paranormal experiences, times when I've encountered things that I can't explain, when I've seen and been in the midst of things that to me defy consensus reality, or what we would know to be, I guess, the laws and rules of our mundane existence. And despite having seen, experienced, and interacted with those sorts of forces or scenarios, I still question and doubt my own beliefs, my own experiences, my own memory, and will try to rationalize things while also believing that I did experience those. At times I will try to, I guess, not even just rationalize, but come to a place where I say that I believe that I had that experience, or I believe that I think I had that experience. So call that what you will. Perhaps it's a little bit of self-gaslighting, or maybe it's just my mind trying to make sense of the nonsensical. But yeah, there are times when things like that occur for me. There are plenty of times when I go to my altar or I perform some sort of what I see to be magic or spellcraft, and halfway through I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? Is this going to work? Is this real? Is this a bunch of mumbo jumbo? There are plenty of spells I've done that I feel haven't worked, and spells that I've just forgotten about and that never really panned out. So yes, there are plenty of times, despite me coming on here and sharing my successes, things that I found to work at different times and various points, beliefs and thoughts that I hold and value, there are contradictions, there is hypocrisy, and all of that I think is part of the human condition. That's something that we can never avoid. I think it's an inevitability. It's sort of a conundrum or a quandary that we're bound to run into. And I think all of that needs to be considered and should be considered more, especially when we are consulting people that we see as figures who may offer help, guidance, who perhaps seem to have the answers. There are many days when I'm not even sure I have the questions, and I think that's a good place to start, trying to understand what questions we should be asking. That's something that I think is, I guess, drawing a parallel, imperative in tarot reading for me. When a client or a querent approaches me and wants to consult the cards, I think the formulation of and knowing your question is just as important, actually perhaps more so important than the answer itself. If you're not entirely sure what it is you're asking, and I think most of the time the initial question we think we want to ask is not actually the question we want to ask, we need to really sit and think with what it is that we even want to know or think we ought to know, what is important to know, before we can begin to fathom what the answer to what we want to know would be. And I think that part of the beauty is in the formulation of those questions and wondering what it is important or worth knowing before we can embark on seeking that out. I think that that's kind of like setting your course, and finding the answer is a lot like embarking on the course and hoping for and setting a tentative destination. So yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is that sometimes we don't have the answers, we don't even have the questions, we don't even know where to begin in fathoming a question, and that's completely fine. We don't even have to have questions. We can wander through life without questions and stumble upon things randomly, and that can be the beauty of an experience. I think spirituality, and those of us who care to consider ourselves spiritual, to have these pursuits, to even put ourselves in the position, and I think it's a vulnerable position to even feel lost and to acknowledge one feels lost. I think it's very easy to take the scary and jarring feeling of being lost or feeling lost and try to cover it up or to distract from what that feeling is, to not investigate it, to try to veer into a different direction or to look to something that feels secure in our lives, maybe when we feel lost in spirituality or about these very grand ideas about existence and what is right and the metaphysical, to turn to something very practical and ignore that facet of our lives and sort of just close it off like a door that we can, shut and move into the next room. I think to even sit with the feeling of being lost, sorry, I'm trying to navigate in this lighting. I think even allowing ourselves to feel that and to question what being lost is all about and how it affects us is a step in the right direction. To sit with the uncomfortable feelings is part of being spiritual. I think there's been that massive movement confronting toxic positivity, and I think that that's been exceedingly helpful. I wanted to say positive, but helpful for the community. I think that there's still a need for transparency when it comes to, apologies, lower battery on the phone. I think that there's still a need, a desire and a need, at least on my part, for transparency in the critical aspects and the negative aspects, the things that affect us in ways that are not so pleasant, positive, savory in the community, to speak out about a lot of these things more so. I think that there is a wariness. There's the idea that we have to tiptoe around our opinions, around our experiences, especially the ones that we don't think will be received very well, that there might not be a place for them, that they may not garner the responses that we want, that there may be pushback. Of course, a video like this that is just hoping to be transparent and to be more candid in one's feelings of being lost is not going to garner, I would hope, any negative feedback on a communal level, but there are, I would say, connected facets that need to be spoken of in terms of spirituality and experience that are critical and harder to talk about, especially when it comes to sharing those things with others, things that we maybe don't want to admit to ourselves, things that we think if spoken about will result in negativity or the loss of connections. I think that all of those sorts of things are things that we do need to be having conversations about and begin to be willing to speak to. I'm not exactly sure even what those topics would be. I guess circling back around to the tangent of not knowing even the questions to ask, let alone the answers, that would be a perfect example of one. But now that I've gone in a bit of a circuitous musing rant, not entirely sure where I've wound up, not entirely sure if there was a point to be made, but more so looking to just share a bit on something that made me feel inspired. Thank you, Hanni, so much for creating that video and being as vulnerable, I guess, as you were in speaking to that idea and asking others and reaching out to the community to see who else has thoughts and feelings and maybe similar experiences in this regard. I personally, as somebody who is creating this video and sharing this idea, would welcome the ideas of others on this topic and speaking to the idea of being lost on one's spiritual path and what that feeling feels like. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. I hope you are all well. If you're feeling lost today, know that you are not alone. Know that there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that there's a power and need. I think that the willingness to, like I said before, admit that one is lost, to sit with that feeling, is a step, what feels like to me, in the right direction. So I hope you are all well. I guess I'll shamelessly plug and say like and subscribe if you would like to hang around and see more from me. And until next time, bye.